50 feet underground, beneath the burning streets of Berlin, a man sat at a table, moving model soldiers across a map. He was moving armies that no longer existed. He was ordering attacks by divisions that had been destroyed weeks ago. His generals stood around him in silence. Nobody dared tell him the truth. The most feared man in the world was giving orders to ghosts. If you want to learn English through powerful stories like this, please follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The links are right below this video. Now, let us go down into the bunker, because the story of Hitler's final days is not just the story of one man's end. It is the story of how absolute power destroys everything, including the person who holds it. To understand the bunker, we must first understand the world above it. By early 1945, Germany was losing on every front. In the east, the Soviet army had been advancing westward for over a year. In the west, American, British, and Allied forces had crossed the Rhine into Germany itself. In the south, Allied forces were advancing through Italy. Germany was surrounded, and Berlin was directly in the path of the Soviet advance. The Führerbunker had been built in two phases. The older upper section was built in 1936. The deeper lower section, where Hitler actually lived, was added in 1943 as Allied bombing increased. It sat 50 feet underground. The walls were concrete, 16 feet thick. It had its own generators, its own water supply, its own ventilation system. It could, theoretically, survive almost anything, except what was coming. Hitler moved into the bunker for the last time on January 16, 1945. He was 55 years old, but he looked much older. The Hitler of 1945 was almost unrecognizable from the Hitler who had launched the war 6 years earlier. His left hand trembled uncontrollably from what was probably Parkinson's disease. He walked with a stoop. His face was grey. His eyes, once described as piercing and magnetic, were dull. The daily routine of the bunker was strange and disconnected from reality. Military briefings were held twice a day, at noon and late at night, often past midnight. Hitler slept late and worked late. The bunker's clocks seemed disconnected from the world outside. Meals were elaborate, despite the war. Hitler was a vegetarian, and his chef prepared special meals, even as Berlin starved. The people in the bunker were a strange mixture. There were military officers, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, General Alfred Jodl, General Hans Krebs. There were political figures, Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary, who controlled access to the Führer, Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, who moved into the bunker with his wife and 6 children, and there was Eva Braun. Eva Braun had been Hitler's companion for over 12 years. Their relationship had been kept almost completely secret from the German public. Most Germans did not know she existed. She arrived at the bunker on April 15, 1945, against Hitler's wishes. He told her to leave. She refused. She said she would stay with him to the end, whatever her feelings about everything Hitler had done. She chose to die with him. Above the bunker, Berlin was being destroyed. Soviet artillery had been shelling the city since April 16th. The noise was constant, even 50 feet underground. The bunker shook. With each explosion, the electricity flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Berlin's civilian population, about 2.7 million people, were living in cellars and ruins, trying to survive the final battle for the German capital. On April 20th, 1945, it was Hitler's 56th birthday, the last birthday he would ever have. A small ceremony was held. Senior Nazi leaders, some of whom would shortly flee Berlin, came to pay their respects. Hermann Göring was there. Heinrich Himmler was there. Albert Speer was there. They shook hands. They gave the Nazi salute. And then, one by one, they left Berlin, knowing what was coming. Only Hitler stayed. After his birthday, Hitler gave orders for the defenders of Berlin to hold the city at all costs. He believed that a relief force under General Felix Steiner would break through the Soviet encirclement and save Berlin. On April 21st, he ordered Steiner's attack. On April 22nd, he waited for news. The news came. Steiner had not attacked. Steiner's forces were too weak. The attack had not happened. What happened next was witnessed by everyone in the conference room. Hitler collapsed into a chair. He shook with fury. He screamed. He raged at his generals. He accused everyone of betrayal. Everyone was a traitor. Everyone had let him down. Everyone had failed Germany. Then, after the explosion of fury, he said something that shocked the room. He said, "The war is lost." After the breakdown, Hitler said he would stay in Berlin. He would not flee. He would not surrender. He would die in the capital. Many of his closest associates begged him to go to Bavaria, to the mountain retreat at Berchtesgaden, to continue the fight. He refused, and secretly, many of those who begged him were already making plans to go themselves. The Nazi leadership was beginning its final, desperate attempt to survive. Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, fled to Bavaria. From there, he sent Hitler a telegram. He asked whether, now that Hitler had decided to remain in Berlin, he should take over as the leader of Germany. Hitler's reaction was explosive fury. He declared Göring a traitor. He had Göring arrested. He stripped him of all his positions. The man who had been Hitler's designated successor was now his prisoner. Then came an even greater shock. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, the man who had built and run the death camps, the man who had been perhaps the most loyal of all the Nazi leaders, had been secretly negotiating with the Western Allies to end the war. Himmler believed that if Germany surrendered to the West rather than the East, he might save himself. When Hitler heard, he declared Himmler the most disloyal man in German history. Inside the bunker, the atmosphere became increasingly surreal. Some officers drank heavily. Eva Braun organized small parties in her room with music and champagne, while Soviet soldiers were fighting street by street just miles away. Some people laughed. Some people wept. The Goebbels children played in the corridors, completely unaware that their mother had already decided what would happen to them. By April 25th, Berlin was completely encircled. Soviet forces had closed the ring around the city. There was now no way in and no way out. 2.5 million Soviet soldiers were advancing into the city from all sides. From the bunker, you could hear the artillery getting closer every day. The sounds moved from distant rumble to nearby thunder to something that shook the walls. Hitler continued his military briefings, but the maps were becoming increasingly meaningless. The pins representing German forces were moved by officers who knew the positions they represented were fiction. German units were either destroyed or surrounded, or had simply stopped fighting. The German defenses of Berlin were held by old men of the Volkssturm, teenage boys of the Hitler Youth, and a handful of SS units, fighting with the desperation of men who knew what Soviet victory would mean. On April 28th, Hitler made two decisions. The first, he would marry Eva Braun. The second, he wrote his final political testament. In the testament, he blamed the Jews for the war. He blamed his generals for losing it. He blamed the German people for not being strong enough to deserve victory. He accepted no responsibility. He showed no remorse. In his final words, he was entirely who he had always been. The wedding took place on April 29th, 1945, just after midnight. A local civil registrar was brought to the bunker. The ceremony was brief. Hitler and Eva Braun were married in a small room off the main conference room. Witnesses signed. Champagne was served. Outside, Soviet artillery continued. The wedding of a man who had launched the most destructive war in human history took place in a concrete box while his empire collapsed. After the wedding, a small reception was held. Hitler's secretaries and other staff attended. Hitler was described as calm, almost detached. He talked about the past, about his early years in politics, about what might have been. Then he retired, and during the night he received the news that his ally Benito Mussolini had been captured and executed by Italian partisans. Mussolini's body had been hung upside down in a Milan square for the crowd to see. April 30th, 1945, the last day. In the morning, Hitler said his farewells. to the staff of the bunker. He went from person to person. He shook hands. He said a few words. Those who witnessed it described his hand as cold and limp, his expression blank. He was saying goodbye to a world he was about to leave. His dog Blondie had already been killed the day before by cyanide to test the poison capsules. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, Hitler and Eva Hitler went into his private study. They closed the door. Outside, a small group waited. Martin Bormann, Joseph Goebbels, several adjutants. They stood in the corridor. They heard a gunshot. After a few minutes, they opened the door. Hitler was dead, from a gunshot wound to the head. Eva Hitler was dead, from cyanide. Hitler's instructions were carried out immediately. His body and Eva's body were carried up the stairs of the bunker to the Reich Chancellery garden. They were placed in a bomb crater. Petrol was poured over them. A match was lit. The bodies burned, while Soviet artillery fell on the garden around them. The remaining bunker staff gave the Nazi salute one final time as the bodies burned. The news of Hitler's death was announced by the German radio on the evening of May 1st. It said he had died fighting to the last against Bolshevism. He had not died fighting. He had shot himself in a chair. But the lie was characteristic. The man who had built an empire on lies had his death announced with a lie. In the bunker, the remaining people began planning escape or suicide. Joseph and Magda Goebbels had their 6 children given sedatives and then killed with cyanide. The children were named Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, Heidrun. Their ages ranged from 4 to 12 years old. Then Goebbels and his wife were also killed by gunshot and cyanide in the garden. The death of the Goebbels children is perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of the entire bunker story. Innocent children killed by their own parents. Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary, attempted to escape Berlin. He was never seen again. For decades, there was speculation that he had escaped to South America. In 1972, a skeleton was found in Berlin. In 1998, DNA testing confirmed the skeleton was Bormann's. He had died shortly after leaving the bunker, trying to escape through the burning streets of Berlin. On May 2nd, 1945, the surviving German forces in Berlin surrendered. Soviet soldiers entered the Reich Chancellery and the bunker. They found the bodies of the Goebbels family. They searched for Hitler's remains. The partial remains were found in the bomb crater. They were taken by Soviet intelligence. For decades, the Soviet Union kept Hitler's remains secret, fueling speculation that he had escaped. The discovery of the bunker raised immediate questions about what to do with it. The Soviets, who occupied East Berlin, were determined that it should not become a place of Nazi pilgrimage. They demolished much of the above-ground Reich Chancellery. The bunker itself was partially demolished in 1947 and again in the 1980s, but it was never completely destroyed. It remained underground, mostly sealed, a concrete monument to everything it had witnessed. Today, the site of the Führerbunker is a parking lot in central Berlin. There is a small sign, a modest information board, that explains what lies below. The German government has deliberately kept the site unremarkable. No monument, no museum, no dramatic memorial, just a parking lot and an information board. The decision was deliberate and is debated still. How do you memorialize a place of evil without glorifying it? But underneath the parking lot, the bunker still exists, or parts of it do. The deep lower section, where Hitler spent his final weeks, is still there, filled with groundwater and concrete. The corridors, the conference room, the small study where Hitler died, still there, 50 feet underground, beneath a Berlin parking lot, the physical space of one of history's darkest moments, still existing, while the world above goes about its normal day. The bunker's story raises uncomfortable questions that we still live with. How did Germany, a sophisticated, educated nation, produce this? How did millions of people follow a man whose plans were written down clearly for anyone who read them, and who ended here, in a bunker, moving imaginary armies and killing himself? The answers are in all the choices made by all the people who said yes when they should have said no. The survivors of the bunker had different fates. Traudl Junge, Hitler's secretary, who had typed his final testament, survived the escape from Berlin, was captured and eventually released. She spent the rest of her life working through her own guilt about what she had been part of. She said, "I was very young, and I didn't want to see what I didn't want to see." Her honesty about her own complicity made her account one of the most valuable testimonies of the bunker period. The story of the Führerbunker is ultimately not a story about Hitler's end. It is a story about beginnings, about how things begin, about the small steps that lead to catastrophe. The bunker is the end point of a journey that began with economic despair and wounded national pride and simple scapegoating and gradual acceptance of each next step as somehow normal. From the homeless man on the Vienna Park bench in 1909, to the corporal who survived World War I, to the Munich rabble-rouser of the 1920s, to the Chancellor of 1933, to the conqueror of Europe in 1940, to the madman moving ghost armies on a map in a concrete room 50 feet underground in 1945. The same person, the same hunger for power, the same hatred, the same refusal to accept reality until reality refused him. The bunker was sealed. Berlin was rebuilt. Germany was rebuilt. The German people did the hard, brave work of facing what had happened, of accepting responsibility, of building something different. Today, Germany is one of the world's most stable democracies. The country that produced the bunker is not defined by it. It is defined by what it chose to become after it. That is perhaps the most important lesson of the bunker story. Not how it ended, but what came after. Thank you for watching this story on Storia English. If you enjoyed learning English through this powerful story, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our Facebook page. Every week we bring you a new story from history, told in clear, slow, simple English, so you can improve your listening, vocabulary, and confidence, naturally, without stress. We will see you in the next story.